Ever dash to catch a bus, heart's pounding, you're out of breath. That feeling, that's cellular respiration.
Yeah, it is.
And today we're diving deep into how our bodies, and every living thing really, turn food into the energy that fuels everything single thing we do.
That's right. From just blinking to running a marathon, it all boils down to energy transformation. And the amazing thing is that this process isn't limited to us. It's happening in plants, animals, every little microscopic
Now,
organism.
we're talking cellular respiration, but what is it? Sounds like something out of a textbook.
Well, at its core, it's breaking down a simple sugar called glucose to release energy. So it's kind of like burning fuel, but on a microscopic level in each and every one of your cells.
Hold on, glucose. Do we eat that directly or?
Good question.
Yeah.
It's a type of sugar our bodies get from the food we eat, primary fuel source for most living organisms.
So when we eat, like pizza or pasta, our bodies break it down into glucose, and then that's used for energy in our cells.
Exactly. It's like our cells have these tiny power plants, and glucose is the fuel. Now, here's where things get more interesting. There are actually two main types of cellular respiration.
Two types. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So, aerobic respiration, most efficient way to get energy from glucose, the one we're familiar with. And it requires oxygen, the stuff we breathe.
Makes sense. So when we inhale, we're giving our cells oxygen to do this aerobic respiration to make energy.
Exactly. Our respiratory system working with our circulatory system to deliver oxygen to every little part of our bodies to keep those power plants, those cells, humming.
So it's not just breathing to live, it's breathing to fuel this energy process. You said there are two types, though. What's the other one?
Anaerobic respiration. And it's pretty remarkable. Doesn't need oxygen.
Wait, life without oxygen? Are we talking aliens now?
Not quite aliens, but some organisms right here on Earth thrive in environments without oxygen, and they rely entirely on anaerobic respiration for energy.
Mind-blowing. So how does life exist without oxygen? What do they use for fuel?
Still glucose, but the breakdown process is different. Yeast is a good example. Single-celled fungi. They use anaerobic respiration, produces alcohol and carbon dioxide as byproducts.
Uh-huh. So that's why yeast is used in baking and brewing. The anaerobic respiration gives us fluffy bread and bubbly beers.
Precisely. The carbon dioxide makes those air pockets in bread to make it rise. And the alcohol, well, that's what gives beer its character.
So bread and beer are byproducts of organisms living without oxygen.
Fascinating.
Huh.
But you said anaerobic respiration happens in our bodies too. But I thought we need oxygen to survive.
We do, generally.
Wow.
But our muscles have a trick. During intense exercise, when they're working hard and need more oxygen than we're giving them, they can temporarily switch to anaerobic respiration to keep going.
Oh, that explains the burning in my legs when I push myself too hard at the gym. But it's not as efficient, right? What are the drawbacks?
One byproduct is lactic acid. And the buildup of that is what causes muscle soreness and fatigue after a hard workout. So our muscles are like, hey, doing my best, but I need more oxygen. And lactic acid is the way they tell us.
Exactly. It's a reminder that our bodies are incredibly adaptable, switching between energy production methods as needed. Before we move on, let's do a quick recap.
Yeah, good idea. We've covered a lot already. Amazing how much goes into just staying alive.
Absolutely. So cellular respiration, breaking down glucose to release energy, can be with oxygen, aerobic, or without oxygen, anaerobic.
Right. And we learned that while we usually use aerobic, our muscles can use anaerobic for short bursts when they're low on oxygen. And some organisms, like yeast, live entirely on anaerobic respiration, giving us bread and beer.
Exactly. Now, before we go further, let's open it up to questions. Any initial thoughts, anything surprise you or pique your curiosity? Seems like you've got the basics of respiration down.
I have to say, I'm finding this all pretty fascinating. Never really stopped to think about how much is going on, at the cellular level just to keep us going.
That's the beauty of science, revealing these intricate mechanisms that make life work. But let's dive back in. We talked about oxygen, right? So how do our bodies actually get it to our cells? That's where breathing comes in.
Okay, breathing, something we do all day, every day without even thinking about it. But how does it actually work?
Well, it's essentially a gas exchange process. Inhale, draw in oxygen-rich air into our lungs, and the oxygen goes across these tiny air sacs in our lungs called alveoli and into our bloodstream.
So our lungs are like these delicate, sponge-like structures that make this exchange of gases happen.
Yeah.
It's amazing. But how does the oxygen get from our lungs to the rest of our body?
Our circulatory system. Our heart acts as a pump, circulating the oxygen-rich blood through the body, delivering it to every cell that needs it. And at the same time, it picks up carbon dioxide, the waste product of respiration, and takes it back to the lungs to be exhaled.
So it's like this coordinated dance between our respiratory system and our circulatory system, working together to make sure every cell gets the oxygen it needs to make energy. And this is all happening automatically.
It is a real testament to how complex and efficient our bodies are.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of breathing itself. When we inhale, our diaphragm, that dome-shaped muscle under our lungs, contracts and flattens, creates more space in the chest cavity.
So our diaphragm is like the engine pulling air into the lungs.
Kinda, yeah. And at the same time, the rib muscles contract, pulling the rib cage up and out, expanding that chest cavity more. This creates a negative pressure, drawing air in.
And when we exhale, the opposite happens.
Yep. Diaphragm relaxes and moves up, rib muscles relax, and the rib cage moves down and in, reduces the space in the chest cavity, forcing air out.
It's amazing how these muscles work together to make this vital process happen. Here's a thought, though. We inhale oxygen, but what are we actually exhaling? Is it just carbon dioxide, or is there more? You're right, it's not just carbon dioxide. Exhaled air also has water vapor. You can see it when you breathe onto a cold mirror, that little puff of fog.
So that's that is. Always wondered, like, our bodies are these little humidifiers.
Speaking of moisture, let's talk about how other animals breathe. Did you know that not all creatures breathe the same way we do?
Yeah. Fish have gills and insects have, like, tiny holes, right? It's all a bit fuzzy, though. Could you refresh my memory?
Of course. Fish first. They live underwater, so they can't breathe air like us. They've got gills, which are these specialized organs that extract oxygen from water.
I've always thought gills were so cool. Like, feathery curtains, how do they work?
They're super efficient at getting oxygen from water. Large surface area to maximize contact. As water flows over them, oxygen diffuses across these thin membranes and into the fish's blood.
So it's kind of like lungs, but filtering oxygen from water. That's wild. What about insects, those little holes?
Spiracles. Tiny openings on the sides of their bodies. Connect to a network of tubes called tracheae, branch throughout the insect's body, delivering oxygen directly to tissues.
So insects have their own internal oxygen delivery system, bypassing lungs and a circulatory system like ours.
They do. Nature is so clever, right? And it's not just fish and insects that have these unique respiratory systems. Earthworms, for example, breathe through their skin. Moist, permeable skin allows oxygen to just diffuse right into their blood. And amphibians, think frogs, breathe through both lungs and their skin.
So breathing through your skin is like having lungs on the outside. Kind of creepy.
Really highlights the amazing diversity of life on Earth, all these incredible adaptations. Before we move on to plant respiration, any questions about these creatures and their breathing? Seems like our listeners are really into this.
It's not every day we get to explore how all these different creatures breathe, but I think we're ready to talk about our last group of respirers, plants.
Yes, the silent breathers. Might not have lungs or gills, but they need respiration as much as we do.
Really? I always thought plants, did the opposite of breathing, taking in carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen.
That's photosynthesis, how they make food. Respiration's how they use that food to get energy.
So even though they're making their own food, they still need to break it down to get to that energy.
Exactly. Just like animals, they need energy for growth, repair, all their life processes. And that comes from respiration, breaking down glucose with oxygen.
So plants breathe in oxygen and release carbon dioxide too.
Yep. Common misconception that they only take in carbon dioxide. They need both for different processes. Daytime, photosynthesis, absorbing carbon dioxide, releasing oxygen. Night, no sunlight, so they switch to respiration. Oxygen in, carbon dioxide out.
That makes sense. But how do they breathe without lungs? Do they have some, secret respiratory system?
Well, no lungs like ours, but they do have special structures for gas exchange. Their leaves have tiny pores called stomata that open and close to control gas flow.
So stomata are like little mouths on the leaves, breathing in oxygen and exhaling carbon dioxide.
Great analogy. And it's not just leaves. Roots need to respire too, and they absorb oxygen from little air pockets in the soil.
It's amazing how every part of the plant is in on it. So, to sum up, plants need respiration, just like animals. To break down food, release energy, mostly breathe through stomata on their leaves, but also absorb some oxygen through their roots.
Great summary. Really shows how interconnected all life on Earth is. We all rely on this process, whether it's lungs and air, gills and water, or tiny pores on leaves.
Yeah, it's really cool that we're all part of this, web of life, sharing this planet and its resources. Before we finish up this deep dive into respiration, I want to leave you with a question to think about.
Ooh, I like that. What is it?
We talked about how life on Earth needs respiration, using oxygen to release energy from food, What about life on other planets? Planets with different atmospheres. Could there be respiration without oxygen?
Now, that's a fascinating question. Could alien life forms have totally different ways to get energy, maybe using other gases or even energy sources we haven't imagined yet?
So many possibilities. Pushes the limits of what we know. Maybe one day we'll have deep dives on extraterrestrial respiration. But for now, we'll keep exploring the wonders of life right here and appreciate all these amazing processes that keep us going.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Always more to explore, more to learn, more to wonder about. That's what makes science so great. So stay curious, everyone. There's a whole world of discoveries out there.